I'm going to tell you why a track saw is much better than a table saw, except when a table saw is much better than a track saw. I'm Ron Paulk, and this is the Smart Wood Shop. If you want to get yourself a set of plans to build a smart wood shop for yourself, one of my workbenches or the brand new Smart Cart, there's a link in the description of this video down below. In the videos that I make here, you see me use a track saw and various size tracks and all kinds of attachments on a regular basis. You also see me using not one, but two table saws just as regularly. Well, the questions that I get are, which is better, a table saw or a track saw? Or when I'm using my track saw to break down plywood, why don't you use your table saw to do that? I want to define what a table saw is and what a track saw is and discuss their similarities and differences. A table saw motor is mounted on the underside of the table, and the rotation of the blade is in the opposite direction that the material is being fed in. What this does is cut the material in a downward motion so that the underside of the material is the most susceptible to tearing out. A track saw is a circular saw which rides on a track, so it works exactly opposite of a table saw. Because your motor is on the top and the rotation of your blade, now your blade is cutting up out of the material, so any splintering you would get would be more pronounced on the top side of your material. A table saw of any size, a small job site saw, a very large job site saw, a contractor saw, or a cabinet saw, they are all identical except for the size. But they're the same tool in that they have a fixed table and a fixed motor blade combination that stay in relationship to each other at all times, and you move the material across the table. There is another type of table saw. It's a sliding table saw. The sliding table saw, the table itself is not fixed in relation to the blade. The table actually moves past the blade. So the blade and the motor are fixed just the way they are on a traditional table saw, but the table slides. It's referred to as a stroke. It can move past the blade. They're very large depending on the length of the stroke. If you're going to be breaking down plywood, you're going to need a minimum of an 8-foot stroke, and I find that a 10-foot stroke or even larger is better. With the sliding table saw, the material is on the table. You're not moving the material, you're moving the table, which guides the material through the blade for a very nice straight cut. Most sliding table saws also have a second blade. They have one large blade, which would be equivalent to the blade on any of the other types of table saws, or the blade on a circular saw like this, the main blade to do the cut. But they also have a smaller blade in front of that larger blade that scores, it cuts the underside just a little bit, and what that does is eliminates or at least reduces that tear out that you get with a traditional table saw. A track saw is more like a sliding table saw than a traditional table saw. In fact, a track saw is essentially a portable sliding table saw. With a track saw, the track is in essence your table, and the track sits on top of the material. The track doesn't move, the material doesn't move. Instead, you're moving the motor or the blade across the material. So in a sliding table saw, the table and the material are in fixed position with each other. They don't move independent, and they move past the blade. With a track saw, the table or the track and the material don't move independent of each other. In fact, they don't move at all. And then the motor, or the blade, moves across the material. So you get the same results. Now, there is no scoring blade. In the case of a motor on the top, we're going to have our tear out on the top. So a track saw, a good quality track saw, will have two splinter guards. They're going to have the splinter guard on the saw, and then they're going to have a splinter guard on the edge of the track. And that edge goes right to the edge of the blade. This is actually where the cut is. There's no offset. When breaking down plywood, a 4x8 sheet, to take that material and move the material against a fence past the blade is very, very difficult. I have done it many, many times. I've had a cabinet shop where I had two large cabinet saws. I did not have a sliding table saw. They were big Powermatics with 52-inch beast bars, 5 horsepower motors, outfeed table, and a big infeed table. No matter how I set them up, pushing the material past the fence is a skill. You have to be very, very careful. Just the slightest movement of not keeping the material, the plywood, in contact with the fence gives you a little bit of drift in your cut. I've always used the technique of keeping my eye on the fence, on the side of the blade that I'm on the infeed side, and keeping so that there's no gap. When I'm pushing through, I'm keeping it tight and watching that. So I was very successful in making cabinets. That's the way I broke down all my plywood. I did not have a track saw back then. In fact, when I had my cabinet shop, either they didn't exist or they only were in Europe, or I had just not heard of them at that time. I did know about sliding table saws, but they were, in the $10,000 to $15,000 range, and they still are kind of there for one with a 10-foot or 12-foot stroke, which is what I would have picked up. And so it just wasn't an option. Again, I didn't have the room for one in my small cabinet shop, and it was a little outside of the budget. When I went all portable and got rid of all of my fixed base machinery, of course I had multiple job site table saws. I had them even when I had my cabinet shop. When I had my cabinet shop, I still had a portable shop, because to finish the job, to take the cabinets to the job and install them and rip fillers and all of that kind of thing, I had to have a portable shop. I had to have both. That was what led to me switching over to improving the portable shop, because I realized that with some tweaks and adjustments, I could do everything with my portable shop that I could do with my fixed base shop. With a sliding table saw, the table is very precisely lined up with the blade, and it's going to push right through perfectly every time. You're not going to get any wobble, and it's going to be perfectly lined up as long as it's calibrated. With a track saw, to get the repeatable results, if I'm going to make a kitchen full of cabinets and I need to rip a large amount of 18mm plywood to widths for bases and widths for uppers, there are accessories. I use these TSO parallel guides, and they're very precise, and they clip onto the track and reference the edge of the material. I have shown using these many times in the past. I'm not going to do it here, but these are excellent for repeatable results. My argument for a high quality track saw and accessories like parallel guides and crosscut guides is that even though they're not cheap, they are the least expensive tool available to us woodworkers to get that repeatable results we get in breaking down plywood, both for ripping and for cross-cutting. We didn't talk about cross-cutting with the table saw. That is very difficult because now you're taking the 8-foot position, you're cutting across the 4, and you're trying to push that through, and that is very, very difficult. If I'm building cabinets, I'm ripping the sides for the bases and the uppers, and I'm cross-cutting them and doing that over and over again. I want them to be exactly the same. So my track saw and my attachments will give me that. But then when it's time for me to cut the spreaders for the top and the back, those are narrow 4-inch wide rips. And to do that with a track saw, it's not very efficient. It's doable, but it's just not practical. That's where a table saw comes in to play. I use a table saw for any rips where I get down. Sometimes I'll go up to 18 inches wide if it's a shorter piece. But if it's, 12, 8, it really doesn't matter how long it is. I'm going to do that with a table saw. So there is a little bit of crossover where, and sometimes, most of the time with 18-inch material, particularly if it's a full 8-foot piece, I'm going to go track saw. But if I'm ripping some 18-inch wides that are, 3 feet long, I'm probably going to go to the table saw. So there is a little crossover, but it really has to do with the size, the length of the material, and the width of the material. You will never see me take a full sheet of plywood and push it across the table saw. And I mean a table saw of any size. Again, it doesn't matter if it's a little portable, a big portable, a contractor saw, or a big cabinet saw. They're not the right tool for breaking down plywood. You won't see me doing narrow, straight rips with the track saw. You'll see me on the table saw. Now, occasionally, when you see me rip something narrower with the track saw, that's because it's a taper. That's a different need, and that's where it's wider on one end and narrower on the other. Then I'm going to use my track. Or if I've got some lumber, like I've went out and got a big piece of maple, and I need to put a straight edge on it. A lot of times people use joiners for that. Then I'll use a track saw to give me my straight edge. And then, of course, it can go to the table saw. So to be very, very clear in answering your question, is a table saw or a track saw better? My answer is yes. If you enjoy these videos, if you've learned anything, if you'd like to see me make more, then give me a thumbs up and subscribe. And remember, when you subscribe, it's important to ring that bell, because that's the only way that YouTube will let you know when I put up a new video. Also, in the comments down below, if there are questions like that you've seen me using a router or table saw or miter saw or some tool in a certain way, and you wonder why I'm doing that or why I might not use a different tool for that, then ask those questions in the comments. And if it looks like a question I can answer here, then I'll make a video just for you. Hey, thanks for dropping into the Smart Wood Shop. You stay safe and have a great day.